I was told that Dean wanted to see me. And Dean had never asked to talk to me before. I mean, we've talked a lot, but never set up a meeting. So I went down to where he worked. He was a retired gentleman that ran kind of our print shop at the Baptist church I was working for in Pomona up in East LA County. You'd go in, and on the days that Dean was working, he would make sure all the bulletins, all the inserts, everyone had what they needed. And he would always be in his old overalls, some sort of plaid shirt, little tiny glasses, beady eyes underneath, a short, squatty guy. If he had a long beard, he'd make a perfect Santa Claus. Always jolly, always smiling. So I walked in, and he's got his headphones on, and the printer's going, cha-ching, 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 and he shuts everything down. Takes off his little headphones, and he goes up, Chris, how much do you pay for rent? And I thought that's kind of an odd way to start a conversation. I was a new youth pastor, an associate pastor at the time, and I looked at him, I said, Dean, we're paying $700 a month right now. And he's all, and what are you getting? I said, we have this one-room apartment up off of Mountain Avenue. We overlook the Stater Brothers. And he goes, let me tell you what's going on. I bought a house for my mom, and my mom passed away. My kid doesn't want it, and I don't want to sell it, but I don't want to be some landlord. I want someone who's going to rent it and just take care of it, and I don't want to ever have to show up. What if I rent that house to you for $700? I goes, are you serious? He goes, it's right here in kind of the old district of Pomona. It's, I think, an 850 square foot little yellow house, Leave It to Beaver neighborhood. I got to go talk to Amy. What's involved in taking care of a house? And he's like, you'll figure it out. Well, a few weeks later, we got a bunch of high schoolers and pickup trucks, and we're moving what little we have across town, and we're moving into this house in Pomona where we would live for about 10 years of our life. About 2 years into renting, I get another thing, hey, Dean wants to talk to you. And so I go down and talk to Dean. And Dean goes, hey, I'm tired of owning that extra house. I think I'm going to sell it. And I was like, uh-oh. He goes, I want to sell it to you. I want to sell it to you for about $200,000. I think that's fair. I come from a family with very limited financial means, and so does my wife. So I didn't really understand financial transactions. This is a good deal or bad deal. I just thought there's no way I can buy a house. I'm making $30,000 a year. My wife is finishing her master's degree in physical therapy. Between us, we have $86,000 in student loans. Thank you, private education. For my 6 years of college, my mom and dad had written me a check for $75. I didn't have the heart to take it into the financial aid office, so I just took my roommates out to dinner for one night. And I looked at Dean and I said, we can't buy a house right now. There's no way we can do this. He goes, I think I'm giving you a good deal. I said, can we rent it? He goes, just keep renting it. We rented for about another 5 years from him. And I get a phone call one day. And Dean goes, Chris, we're getting ready to move out of the area. We're really, really, really going to retire. I want to get rid of that house. I want to sell it to you. I go, well, Dean, what are you asking for it now? He goes, I was okay 5 years ago with $200,000. I'll be okay for $200,000. I said, Dean, this house is worth probably at least $300,000. He goes, I know. You guys have been good to the church, good to the area. We want to do this. I said, let me think about it. And I called Dean back later that night, and I said, Dean, I need to talk to you. You deserve this from us. You've been incredibly great for us. I got to tell you what's going on between Amy and I and our family, and no one else knows about this except for 3 people. I think we're about to leave the area. There's a church down in San Diego County called North Coast, and although we love being up here, I think it's time for us. We have to take this. And if I say yes to buying your house, probably in the next month, I'll sell this thing for $300,000. And my bet is you'll hear about that, and that'll sting a little bit. He goes, oh, yeah, it would. I said, so thanks for giving us amazing rent. He only had to visit the house once in 8 years because we flooded the thing. But other than that, I took care of it. I said, Dean, I'm going to let you know if this goes through. And if it does, then I'll tell you, and you can put this house up on the market. I got a phone call first thing the next morning. It was Dean Studley. Dean said, Chris, I just want you to listen. I was laying in bed last night with Phyllis. Phyllis is his wife. I'll connect the dots for you. Dean's a good guy. Phyllis is even a greater woman. And he goes, we're laying there staring at the ceiling, and Phyllis goes, Dean, how many times have we sat in church and we heard about people doing amazing things for people? And Dean goes, I love those stories. And Phyllis said, honey, I think we're at a point in our life where we can do an amazing thing for somebody. Why don't we sell them that house for $200,000? And Dean goes, but they're getting ready to leave. We could sell it for more. And Phyllis goes, if you were happy yesterday at $200,000, why wouldn't you be happy today at $200,000? He said, so Chris, you're my third phone call of the day. I called my financial advisor, and I called a realtor, and they're drawing up papers. I want to sell you that house for $200,000, and you turn around and you sell it for whatever you can. 3 Fridays later, 9 o'clock in the morning, I meet with my realtor buddy from church. He's saying, how in the world are you buying this for this? And I told him the story. I said, how much do you think it's worth? He said, maybe about $320 right now on the market. He said, you know, I'm interested in buying property in this area. I go, seriously? Are you interested in this? He goes, I may be. And I said, I'll sell it to you for $300. He goes, oh no, you can get $320, maybe $330 for it. And I go, I'm buying it for $2. At 9 a.m., I bought my first house for $200,000. At 9:30, I sold it for $310,000. We paid off some loans. We paid off a credit card. We paid off $86,000 check I wrote to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I've never met Fannie or Freddie. We had money to move down here, and I told Amy, you know those crummy couches we've been using for the last 12 years that were donated to us because they were old? We're leaving the couches. And we're able to buy a new couch. And Amy and I had already been started on this track of generosity. But what Dean and Phyllis did at that moment in our life, to take that financial burden from our shoulders, just catapulted Amy and I to, we got to live like this. From now on, it's made clear, no house will ever be our house, because the only way we got into or out of one was because of this. Saturday morning, I sat down, I started making a list of people. Darwin and Robbie East, when they found out I wanted to leave Texas and come out this way, he said, I'll give you a job driving tractors, and you could stay at our house until you get under your feet, or over your feet, or whatever your feet do in that scenario. Jim and Heather Trail was the first couple that looked at me and said, you're a loudmouth, obnoxious, arrogant guy that disturbs the community, but somewhere in there, I think God has given you gifts. And when every church or Christian school I was in tried to get me out of their organization, Jim pulled me in and said, I think there's a different plan for you than heavy equipment. Frank and Leslie Peters was the couple that heard when I was leaving a general engineering job to go into ministry. Frank said, how much are they paying you? And I said, right now it's either $200 a month or $100 a month. We're negotiating. He said, why don't you stay in our garage? They had redone their entire garage to make a little bedroom and a little kitchen area. And he said, it's for ministry. As long as you're in ministry, you can live in our garage. It was a group of ladies from the seniors Bible study that came with 2 cardboard boxes one day of plates and silverware and utensils, stuff like spatulas that a 23-year-old guy would never have on his own, and said, hey, we heard you're living in a house now. And I go, well, it's a garage. And they said, do you have this? And I looked in the box and I go, nope. And they said, we all went home and we took a collection from our cupboards. None of it matches, but we know you don't care. I had home in a box. After years of doing ministry and trying to go back and get a theology degree, it was Dr. Bruce Boulogne that opened up these scriptures, and for the first time, the most boring book in the world became page after page of life-giving grace and mercy and pictures, stories that I couldn't get enough of. I went back and took every class that he had. In my senior year, I was a youth pastor at this church up in Pomona, working with about 150 inner city kids, trying to do 18 units of theology to finish that degree off. And Dr. Boulogne called me after class, and he goes, hey, how you doing? And I go, good. And he goes, you don't look good. He said, you've taken every class that I've had. And he goes, something's different about you now. And I looked at him, and I said, I'm dying. I said, I'm giving every hour of my life to these kids in the inner city, and I'm still trying to pull off this theology degree right now. And he said, how you doing on the Old Testament paper? It's a 30-page Old Testament paper. It's going to take dozens and dozens of hours to complete. It's half your grade. And I said, I haven't even started my paper. And he said, that's what I thought. He said, you know, I wouldn't be a professor equipping people to do ministry if I made you do a paper instead of ministry. In 2 weeks from now, when everyone turns in their folder, I want you to have a folder, and I want it to be empty. You have an A in the paper, and no one will ever hear about this. I said, yes, sir. It's been 22 years. I think it's okay to share the story. It was Vonnie Glover, a secretary at that church, that came out to me one day and said, "How long do you think that Jeep of yours is going to run?" And I said, "I don't know." I was driving an old post office Jeep, steering wheel on the wrong side, little metal table next to you. If anyone rode with me, they had to sit on the metal table. It was so illegal. You had to get used to driving on the wrong side. I kept hitting curbs going the other way. I said, "We got the Jeep for $500. The post office was getting rid of them. I don't know how long it's going to run." She goes, "My husband and I are buying a new car. Our old sedan works. There's just a lot of miles on it. Here's the keys." We drove that car for 3 more years. It was Dave and Arlette that said, "Hey, we hear you got a car that can't go in reverse anymore." And I go, "That's a true story." You got to be very strategic when you can only go forward. You watch where you park. I'm the guy in Walmart that parked way out. And you're like, "Who parks way out here?" "A guy that can't go backwards." They said, "Hey, we got an extra pickup truck." And I go, "Who has extra pickup trucks?" "Well, we closed down some of our business. We have some extra trucks. We'd like to make a deal with you." "Are you kidding me?" It was a guy named Tom that walked in my office one day and said, "Hey, we got round-trip tickets to Hawaii, a vacation plan, a timeshare. We have a family emergency. We can no longer go, but I can't refund this stuff. You have to leave tomorrow. You're the only person I know that doesn't have a real job, so I'd come to you." I said, "Tom, we have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. There is no way we can do this right now, but we would have loved to gone to Hawaii. Thanks for the dream." And he left the office, and I called Amy, and I said, "You can't believe what I just turned down." And my wife said, "Go get him." With a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, she goes, "Look, if you're not going, I'm going without you." I said, "What are we going to do with our kids?" She goes, "There's one lady in the church I would trust. I'm going to call her and just see." And that lady changed her whole schedule to take a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old for 7 days. That was a bigger wow than selling the house. It was Bob and Judy that said, "We know you love to fish and you love being out in the desert because you came from the desert. We have a place in Mexico. Here's a spare set of keys. Whenever you're there, it's free. We don't get down there that much, but man, it's my place just to unplug from life." It's the dozens and dozens of anonymous gifts and givers early in our marriage and in our ministry that came in, and little did they know they saved something. It was the Christmas where we were opening some presents under the tree, and I noticed there's an envelope on it. We had no idea how it got there. And when we opened it, there was a cashier's check for $1,000, anonymous. It changed Christmas that year. It's stories in my life, and my life and ministry is built on the generosity of others, and so many of you. Already in the messages that I've delivered this weekend, I've gotten cards from people saying, "Let me tell you about what God did when we were missionaries. Let me tell you what God did when we were starting a church. Let me tell you what God did in my wife and I's life when we were young, and it was because of the church, the church, the church." Let me tell you what happens when the people of God grasp onto the generosity of God and how it changes lives and futures forever. It's that entire Philippians type giving where Paul says God will meet all of your needs. And he writes to a group of people, he goes, "Because you've been invested in ministry and you've been pouring out yourself, and so God's going to take care of you." And we come to this place in Romans 12 where God goes, "I want you on this Father's Day to get the heart of your Father. I want you to unleash something in your life that's going to give you a freedom and a joy that you would never get if your mind is set on your old way of living." And that's what this entire deal is about. I want you to go to Romans 12, where we've been camping out for the last few weeks. And in Romans 12, I want to give you context on wanting to be like Dad. We hit it several weeks ago, the first 2 verses, but I want to go back and read them because everything we've been stopping on falls underneath the context of chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. For 11 chapters, we've been going verse by verse through this book of Romans. If you got a Bible or an app, open it. If you got a page Bible and you're flipping around, go to the back. Look for the guys' names: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Acts, Romans, I got to complete that for you. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Acts, then Romans. Romans chapter 12 says this: "Therefore," circle, highlight, underline, "I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then," circle, highlight, underline, "then you're going to be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. In context, it starts with, write it down, first blank, therefore. We hit this some weeks ago, but I want to go back and set this up because everything I'm going to challenge you with today falls under therefore. 11 chapters of what God has done for you. 11 chapters saying clearly you will never be good enough, moral enough, right enough, or spiritual or religious enough to get to heaven. You can't do it. And what was impossible for you, God did. When you didn't have a way to God, God said, I came to you. And when you didn't have a way to heaven, God said, I'm giving you my son to cleanse whatever sin, whatever wrong you have so that you can be with this Father forever. I'm going to give you grace when you don't deserve grace. I'm going to give you mercy when you don't deserve mercy. I'm going to give you forgiveness when all you have to do is ask for it. I'm going to pay the price. And he goes, then I'm going to change the old you. I'm going to put the Spirit of God in your life, and it's going to change you. You're going to walk with God. It's going to change the way you see yourself and see others. 11 chapters. This is what God has done. Therefore, everything we do for God is a result of what he's done for us. Never working for him. Therefore, number 2, you're a living sacrifice. You're a living sacrifice. This is your spiritual act of worship. You give all that you are and all that you have to God. You don't kill yourself. That's a sacrifice, totally devoted to God. You're going to be a living sacrifice. If you go back and read one of the first books in the Bible, Deuteronomy, God sets down the law for his children. He goes, I want you to give generous. I want you to treat the stranger with incredible generosity. I want you to give to those in poverty. I want you to supply the needs of others. And at least 10 times in that book, he ends those commands with simply saying this: remember that you were once slaves in a foreign land and God redeemed you. Here's why I'm asking you to be generous. Remember what I did to you. Remember who you were. Remember what you were destined to do. Remember where you were going to end up. Remember what I did for you. Therefore, here's how you're going to treat others. Paul picks up this writing in Romans chapter 12 and says, because of everything God has done, now you give him everything. You sign over the pink slip to your life. I love, there's a book I've been reading called The Blessed Life. So far, I'm a third of the way through it, and it's been amazing just on how to unleash generosity in your life. It's by a guy named Robert Morris. Amazing story of a guy that walks around and just lives life for others. Incredible generosity. And one day he was out to dinner with another couple, and he got up and he left the table, and the couple looked at his wife and they were just shaking their heads. And they said, why? Why is your husband so generous? And immediately the wife just shrugged her shoulders, and in that Texas draw and accent, she goes, I guess he ain't ever gotten over getting saved. Man, what a great definition of generosity. Why are you so generous? I haven't ever gotten over getting saved. I remember what was done for me. So I gave everything to him. How's that going to work? I'm glad you asked. Number 3, do not conform. So do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but you're going to be transformed by a new mind. You can't look at life your old way of looking at life. If you do, you will never walk in this new way of life. You can't say, I'm a Christian, but God, I'm still going to think of my stuff, my possessions, my way. And he goes, then Christ doesn't have your thinking. He goes, I want a new you. I don't want the old you, and I don't want to fix the old you. So I want to read some verses that we're camping on today. Chapter 12, starting at verse 8. Actually, starting at verse 7. We went through this gift of spiritual gifts. We all have different gifts. We're all supposed to be useful in the kingdom of God. Okay, verse 6. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. If a person's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, then let them serve. If it's teaching, let them teach. If it is encouraging, then let them encouraging. If it is contributing to the needs of others, let them give generously. If it is leadership, let them govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, then do it cheerfully. Drop down to verse 9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, honor one another above yourselves, never be lacking in zeal, keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. We've been hitting these. This is the mark of a new us. Share with God's people who are in need, practice hospitality. He says, let me tell you what the new you is going to look like. Let me tell you when you know that Christ has got control of your thinking. You've been blessed to bless others. You've been blessed to contribute to the needs of others in the kingdom of God. Let me tell you, when you know that gets to your heart for every one of us, you're going to share with God's people who are in need, and you're going to practice hospitality. Hospitality is not inviting people over for dinner. That's how we use the word. Hospitality was showing God's love to people you didn't know, strangers. In that day and age, it was the people that were traveling from town to town. And if other Christians were traveling through your town, they had very few options on where to stay. And usually where they stood was the red light district. He goes, you're going to open your home to strangers. You're going to love people that you've never met before. This is going to be the mark of a new you. And that's what I want to talk about, changing the way we think when it comes to that. I want $100. Does anybody have $100 on them that they can? Seriously? $100. Thanks. 2 50s. Who carries 50s anymore? Nice. What we're getting to in Romans 12 is this idea of, so how do we see our stuff? How do we see our finances? Right now, some of you are like, oh, the church is talking about giving. Man, the church is going to be talking about giving. The church is looking for money. Our church does well. We handle finances like we challenge you to handle finances. We don't even use all of our offering. We make sure 1/10 of what comes in is set aside. That's how we're able to pull off other campuses and other campuses. And now more people down in San Diego, south on the 15, and Temecula and Murrieta are asking for a North Coast. And we're waiting to go, well, we'll just wait and see what comes in. But this isn't one of those, hey, we got to have your money today. This isn't, turn to the back of your bulletin. You'll see the 6 staff will fire unless you put money in the offering today. And you're like, I don't like him. I don't like her. I don't care. No. I want to change the thinking on that. I want you to write it in this way. This isn't about giving. This is about management. This isn't the church needs your money. It doesn't. And this isn't God needs your money. He doesn't. He prints his own. God doesn't need your money. And this isn't about a giving. The moment you said, therefore, because of 11 chapters, what God has done, I give him everything. Everything I own, I signed it over. I'm a living sacrifice. It's all his. And that's my only, look at what he did for 11 chapters in my life. It's all his. Now, this isn't about giving. So how do I manage his stuff? I signed over the deed to my house. I signed over the pink slip to my car. I signed over my banking account, my shaving account. Shaving? I have a shaving account. Checking and savings all in one, my shaving account. Retirement. Kids' school. Future tuition. I'm a living sacrifice. I can't say, God, you have my Sunday, but this is my stuff. There is no such thing as Christian wealth. It's all his. This isn't about giving, it's about management. Write it this way. It's not how much of our wealth we give to God, but how much of his wealth we keep for ourselves. This is the new mindset. He said, wait, remember verses 1 and 2? You gave me everything. So this isn't how much of what I get paid on the 15th and 30th I give to God. This is how much of his wealth do I think Amy and I should keep for ourselves. And that's a balance. We'll talk about that. I taught my kids early about the tax man. I wanted to get prepared for living in the U.S. I don't mind that. I see the roads we have. I see the infrastructure we have. I see the first responders we have. I see the government we have. I'm not saying it's all perfect, but I've been to many other countries, and I'm so glad I'm here. And every time it comes time to pay taxes, I just go, great. Part of living in this country is what we have. I get it. But I want my kids to be aware of that. So when we go to In-N-Out and they order animal fries, Dad doesn't order animal fries. I'm calorically challenged. Chubby guy has a small problem with animal fries, so I just stay away. But when they order animal fries, I reach across the table and I take a chunk right on top with the cheese and the grilled onions all on it, and I slowly pull it to my mouth and I eat it. And they just sit there like this. They learned early on, Dad paid for that. Dad takes whatever percentage he wants. And the moment you complain, Dad goes back for seconds. I'll take a bite of that double-double, and if you go, Dad, I'll take a second bite even bigger. So now they just sit and glare. Little guy walks out of 7-Eleven with a 7-colored Slurpee, and he's proud of it. I just hold out my hand, and he puts his head down and just hands it to me. Hand it back. You complain, I'm taking a bigger drink. We walked out of yogurt. This is last week. Yogurt used to be a cup or cone, they give it to you, go. Now they give you a 50-gallon drum and you fill it yourself. And they weigh our entire family on the way out, and that's what you pay. So my kid has got a 50-gallon drum of candy he forgot to even put yogurt on it. It's just a spoon of candy. I take a bite of his. I'm walking to the van. I don't get yogurt because I'm eating all theirs. I look at Karis, my middle daughter. She's got her yogurt all swirled, and she's got 5 little cookie dough crumbles on top. She hands it to me. I take a spoon, and I get 2 of the cookie dough. And I see her go, "Dah!" And she stops herself. She knows the tax man. She knows if I say something, he's going to take all 5 cookie doughs. Just be happy he only took 2. Early on, I told him, guys, it ain't yours. It ain't yours. The one time we went to ice cream and Barrick paid with his own money after his birthday. Dad, I'm going to buy my own. I didn't know why he was doing it at first. Hey, I'm buying. All right, guy, buy your own. It's because we sat at the table. And when I went to go grab a bite, he's all, Dad, this is mine with my money. I said, that's fair. I said, you're going to need to get some boxes. He goes, why do I need boxes? I said, because when we get home, you're moving out of my house. He put his head down and he slid the yogurt across the table. It's all Dad's. You're going to be grateful with what's in your cup, but it's Dad's. Some of you are still struggling with this so far because I took someone's $100 and you're like, what do you took that $100 for? Because I'm doing this all weekend long. You know the only person that's sitting here right now who wasn't upset that I took the $100 was the guy who gave it to me. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that I have it, and he doesn't care what I do with it. You know why? Because before you guys got in here, I gave him 2 50s. And I said, somewhere in this, I'm going to ask for him back. Just jump up and give him to me. He's like, yeah, no problem. And I've been keeping an eye on him at the beginning, going, don't go. It was my money. He had no problem when I said, hey, I want $100. He runs up, there you go. Woohoo! Doesn't care where it goes and what I do with it. It was my money. See, I could be very generous with your money. You come to me and say, Chris, I want you to give $10,000 away to any needs you find this week. I'm going to have a great week finding some needs. You show up at my door and say, hey, Chris, I think you should give away 10,000 of your dollars this week. You better first shut up and get off my porch. It's my money. It's an ownership issue. It's not how much of our wealth do we give to God. How much of His am I keeping for myself? I want you to write it down this way. Generosity is the key to unlocking the ownership myth. Generosity is the key to unlocking the ownership myth. Who owns your life? The more Amy and I started practicing generosity early on, the more we saw it in our life. Early on, before we had any money to give, $86,000 in student loans, $30,000 a year. She's working in her master's program. We sat down and said, we're going to start tithing right off the top. Otherwise, if we wait till the end of the month, we don't have any money left. We never have any money left. And if it's going to be our money, we wait till the end of the month and see how much we give to God. If it's really His life, His talents, His money, at the front, we're going to give back. And then just say, hey, we'll try to live off what happens. And over the years, as finances grew, as salaries grew, we said that's our starting point. How can we keep going? How can we keep going? How can we outgive God? And we've never been able to outgive God. But I want to be Dean and Phyllis Studley. I want to be the people now that anytime we get a different car, we find someone in ministry and say, it's your car. We take them out to dinner. We go back to our house, we give them the keys, and we say, drive away, it's your car. I want to be that couple. I want to now be that person that goes, God, if it's yours and we're getting blessed with something, how do we turn around and bless others? It's easy to give it away if it's not mine, and this unlocks this ownership myth. Whose life is it? He goes, Chris, I want to break you of the old you. Remember how you did your life? You were wrapped up in it. If I can break you of that, I'm going to free you to be in a new you. On this Father's Day, God didn't create giving for His sake. He created giving for our sake. He said, boy, you are going to be most like me when you're generous in serving others. You're going to be closer to the heart of your dad when you look and act like your dad. And your dad for 11 chapters is poured out. He's a generous, giving God. Saying it's all God's, spending like it's all God's are two different things, isn't it? Saying it's all God's. But then living life, spending like it's all God's, are two different things. I've always told people, they come and go, hey, tithing, giving 10% to God. I mean, that's Old Testament. And I go, that's right. That was the law. That was legalism. We don't live under the law. If that's what the law required, what do you think God wants now after we've seen him give his son and grace and mercy is given to us? That's up for you to decide. You'll square that with God one day. For me, I look at it and go, God, I know you want me to be generous. It's all throughout your scripture. Break this habit of me thinking this is my stuff and I'm being really nice when I tip you on the weekends. Show me how to manage your stuff. So I'm giving you some homework to do because I want to show you what you are doing in places where you didn't even know you've gone. Your homework this week is 4 pillars for being a trustee. A trustee, one who's been giving management of someone else's resources, funds, estate. You see, there's so many verses on finances. I just figured I'd sit down and show you. This is what Amy and I have done. Number 1, Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Right next to it, the talents. Matthew 25 is the last chapter. Jesus talks to the crowd before he goes to the cross. I put more importance on that. I think all of his words count, but famous last words. He said, look, before I go and die, I want you to know what the final result is going to look like. I want you to know what happens at the end. He goes, let me tell you a story. There's a man who goes away to be made king, but before he does, he gives each of his servants a sum of money. He says, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to see what you did with it. And that man went away. He got to be king, and then he came back, and he lined his servants up to see what they have gained with what he gave them. And the first guy comes, says, man, I made 10 out of it. Well done, good and faithful. You can share in my joy. The second guy goes, man, I made 5 out of what you gave me. Well done, good and faithful. You can share in my joy. And the last guy goes, I buried it in the earth. I used all of your talents, all of your treasure here on earth. I buried it. And the king says, you wicked servant. You knew I wanted you to use this for me. Away from me. The next verse is in Matthew 25, 31 through 46. Please, single person, newly married couple, spouses, empty nesters, grandparents, sit down this week. Just look at these 4 and say, so what do we do? The next one, he goes, let me tell you about this final judgment. He said, it's going to be one day my Father's going to separate those on his left and those on his right. Those on his right, he said, I was naked and you clothed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was hungry and you fed me. I was a stranger and you took me in. And they said, when did we see you like that? And he goes, whatever you did to the least of those, my brothers, those in the church, whatever you did to the least of Christians in the world, you've done to me. Welcome to the kingdom of God. He's then going to turn to those on his left and say, I was hungry and you never fed me. I was thirsty. You never gave me something to drink. I was naked. You didn't clothe me. And I was a stranger. You never invited me in. And they said, when did we see you like that? He will say the same thing. Whatever you've done to the least of these, my brothers, those in the church, you've done to me. Depart from me. The very next verse says, Jesus then went to Jerusalem to take the cross. See, before he left, he goes, I want you to know what your final exam is going to be based on. What have you done with his stuff? Because you're now his. So I have those as 2 cornerstones to how we do finances in the Brown house. Number 3 is Luke 12, 31 through 21. It's the foolish rich. It's a great little story where Jesus is teaching and someone in the crowd says, tell my brother to give me money. And he's like, you guys are idiots. You can't even hear the word of God because you're worried about your finances. He goes, let me tell you a story. There's a guy who had a great crop and then a great crop. Man, he was very successful. He goes, I don't even have a place to store all my stuff. So we built bigger barns, and bigger barns. He goes, this is my stuff. Here's what I'm doing with my life. And this is how I'm going to end the rest of my life. And that very night, God showed up and took his life and said, now who's got your stuff? He said, this is how it's going to be for those who are not rich towards God. And I put that in my file cabinet years ago. I said, that's important. How much am I building up in my barns here on earth? God didn't mind that we have wealth. I mean, we're stinking wealthy here. He goes, no. The problem was you were stingy with your wealth towards the things of God. I jotted that down. That's my 3rd pillar. And 4th, 1 Timothy 6, 17 and 18. 1 Timothy 6, 17 and 18 simply says this. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in their wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in God, who has richly provided us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, be rich in good deeds, be generous, be willing to share. In this way, they're going to lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Command those who are rich in this world. Don't be arrogant about what you have and about what you've made. It's all a gift from God. Again, not to feel guilty about what you have, not to feel guilty with how much you've been given. He goes, but command them not to put their hope in their future and their wealth, but command them to be rich towards God. In this way, you're storing up for yourself for eternity. Anytime Amy and I have a financial decision, these are the 4 posts we put that decision on. You're going to ask me, what did I do with my stuff one day? Because it's not mine, it's yours, okay? You're going to tell me at the end, you want to know what I've done with your stuff to serve your kingdom and your people. You've made it very clear not to be a foolish rich, which was number 3. You better not have all your stuff about you and your family and your life. And you've commanded me to be the wise rich, number 4. The wise rich, be rich towards God. Chris, it's okay you have, don't feel guilty. But you've been blessed to bless others. A year and a half ago, I took my son to Ecuador because I wanted to show him how most of the boys and girls his age in this world live. We went there to look at some of the kids we support through Compassion International. We met a pastor who had about 40 people in an open field, been ministering in this little place for years. All they wanted was a church, but when you minister in 40 people, the poorest of the poor, you're never going to own land or a building. And I came back and I told you guys, for $75,000, we can build this for them. Would you like to help? To refresh your memory, a year and a half ago, I showed you this video. The church that we want to support has been in this neighborhood for 6 months. And in 6 months, they've been renting a small space. These are the families that already they're impacting. These are all the ones waiting to be sponsored. Compassion does not have a program in this community because Compassion only works through the local church. Right now, there's no real church established. This is the community that we need to establish a church in. We are here in the hills just outside of Guayaquil, the largest city in Ecuador. And we are on the plot of land that we have the possibility of buying and making a church right here in this community. It's going to go from this corner lot all the way down to that far corner and all the way back up the hill to build a sanctuary, to build multiple classrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, more importantly, a place where Compassion International can now start sponsoring all these kids in the village through your help. Now here's what the kicker is. This little brick building behind me that is more secure than any other house in the village is what we're buying. Why is it more secure? This is the main drug house right here in this community. That's the property we're buying, we're tearing down, and we are building a church on that spot. You can't make this stuff up, North Coast. This is absolutely amazing. So we came back about a year and a half ago, and I said, do you guys want to do that? We already sponsor about 2,500 kids through Compassion International. Would you like to build a church in an area where there's no physical church, just a group of people meeting in a field? Compassion would then say, we can put 300 kids in that center, feed them every day, make sure they have education, give them all the medical attention they need, and make sure they have Bible studies every day. We're going to have buckets at the door with your spare change on the way out. Just see what you want to do. And on that weekend, you guys came through. So I called them up and I said, where'd it go? An earthquake had happened down in Ecuador between now and then, made building really slow, really tapped the resources of that country, which is already depleted. A rainy season hit that was just messed up everything. And then in about 7 months, they said, we're starting your project. So a little while ago, I took JD, our campus pastor from Carlsbad, and Jay, our campus pastor from San Marcos Escondido, and I said, let's go see if they're really doing it. I'm still wearing a bracelet, Ecuadorian colors, that the kids made each of us. It was their way of saying thank you for giving us a church. And I want to show you your church in Guayaquil, Ecuador, even though I say Mexico, skip it, there's no editing. It looks like this. Well, hey, North Coast, I'm here in Florida Bastion in the hills just outside of Guayaquil, Mexico. If you remember about a year and a half ago, I showed some video about coming down here, and I said there's a church meeting outside in the open air. If you build it, people will fill it. Well, a year and a half later, you guys built it, and now we're going to go see the people that have filled it. All right, North Coast, well, as you can see, you have an incredible little church auditorium, but the rest of this facility is absolutely amazing.
We've got girls' bathrooms. Hola! Hola! We got guys' bathrooms that are brand new and built in here. Yeah! We've got kids' classrooms that are completely done and about as furnished as a kid's classroom is going to get down here. We've got another, hola! We got another classroom in the back. And then in here we have a kitchen so the kids can get fed like they're doing right now. Hola! Another bathroom. An incredible kitchen area to prepare all the food. And then this, where you have classrooms and meals. Hola! Unbelievable. These kids are eating because they go to school in the afternoon now. And this is their meal of the day. It's right about noon. And they are going to eat and then head their way off to school. Hola! Hola, amigo. ¿Cómo está? Bien? Muy bien. And that has been done in just 7 months because we took an offering at the end of the service and simply said, there's a pastor here working with the community. They meet in a field. How would you guys like to give them a church? And a year and a half after I came down here and brought my son Barrick and showed you guys the video, you guys have accomplished this. One of the most incredible facilities in this entire area and an amazing church, as you can see, in an area of the world that desperately, desperately needs it. So proud of you guys.
Isn't that cool? The problem was that day we asked for $75,000 for whatever spare change you had on you. In a church our size, you guys did not give $75,000. You gave $150,000. So I called up Compassion and I said, how many churches do you have waiting to be built in Ecuador? And they said about 40. There's about 40 areas where indigenous pastors are already doing great work, but there's no buildings. And we will only sponsor kids if they go through a local church. That's their commitment to church. And I said, we're going to go down and see if you guys really did what we asked you to do. And boy, did they. And I said, okay, we've got a second one. And we're not taking an offering today for that because you already paid for it. In fact, you're going to see the land that it's going on. Construction's already started. At the time we filmed this, we were hoping this would be where the church is. Now we know this is where the church is being built. JD from Carlsbad said, our campus will take all 300 of these kids. We're going to sponsor these kids. Just like Jay from San Marcos sponsored all 300 from the church that you just saw. I want to show you where your second church is going in Ecuador.
Hey everybody, welcome to Montalvo, a little town of about 8,000 people here in the middle of Ecuador, right on the foothill of the Andes mountain range behind me. This is a place that's gone through about 450 years of slavery. Because of that, they're a little bit leery of outside organizations. We are using a local pastor, but the priests in the area have already come through and said this program is going to once again enslave their kids. Because of that, then, our guys have been going door to door telling families, this isn't about enslavement. This is about us being able to give your kids proper nourishment, because poverty is extreme in this area. This is about your kids getting an education. This is about your kids being taken care of. This is a place you are already doing work even though you don't realize it yet. We're going to go show you where we're about to build a church and sponsor 300 Compassion kids because of your generosity. We just hiked through the jungle. I'm hot and sweaty with JD, our Carlsbad campus pastor. Tell us about where we are and what we're doing here.
This is amazing. Montalvo. This is the outskirts of a city of about 8,000. It's a community that needs church, that needs Jesus, a community that might begin here. Big plot of land, a farmer has owned it. They're praying for that farmer that he would allow the church to build here. We've got corn over here, we've got jungle, rainforest, and behind us, a river. Future baptisms. The pastor's praying for it. He's praying for the people of this community. Let's join him.
So I just want to capture this moment. It's the first time in the middle of Montalvo that we got a chance to meet with the head pastor here of all the churches, the Nazarene churches in this area. And the man in white in the back that JD is talking to is the pastor that's about to take our plant. The reason why he's crying is because they just said 3 months ago, after 4 years of praying for the city in desperate need of a Christian church, 4 months ago they got together as a team and said, we just need to take all of our prayers and all of our efforts and put it right here on the city. I told him that that's the exact same time period that I got a list of so many churches here in Ecuador that are ready to be planted but don't have the resources. And even though we've never seen them, even though we've never been to this village, for whatever reason, North Coast leadership just felt like this is where we're supposed to go. And when that pastor heard it, he and his wife just broke into tears. To realize what God was doing in a Spanish language down here through a group of pastors, and what God was doing at North Coast with those of us that just said there's a need somewhere. And today they just found the answer to prayer that they've been looking for, and that's because of you guys.
Isn't that amazing? Early on, I tried to teach my kids about living in America and the tax man through what I do with their yogurt and their animal fries. About 8 years ago, I tried to teach them the reason why you're in America and that you're one of the rich kids is because 90% of the world needs you. So you will do all of your weekly chores, and you will do everything we ask you to do, and you will never touch your allowance. Your allowance will go to a kid that you sponsor, and each one of my kids picked up a compassion kid way back then. Samuel, Janet, and Irene, all from the same village in Africa. And I said, you are going to change their lives, and you are going to change their family. Because for the first time, parents have hope for a child because their child is going to be taken care of. And I wanted them at an early age to understand you are blessed to bless others. This is who we're called to be. This is dad stuff. It's not about more toys for your closet. You'll always have enough. It's why our church sponsors some 2,500 compassion kids. What amazed me was walking through that village in that white church that you built, and we went into every bamboo hut. Very few of them have any type of roof span that covers. There's usually one tarp in the corner, and when it rains, and it rains a lot in Ecuador on the equator, the family all gets in the corner of the house, and the rest of the house just gets flooded. It's what every house is built like in that village. Here was the difference when we went there. When we went there this time, we walked into house after house after house, and there were pictures of North Coast family, North Coast family, North Coast family. And there were toys and there were gifts, because those 300 kids in that program have already been sponsored by people in San Marcos in that campus. Pastor Jay from San Marcos went into one, and I said, I just want to film this. This is just too awesome. This is one of the homes and one of the kids and one of the families that you've changed a destiny of.
What's up, North Coast? We're outside one of the homes of the Compassion families. They've invited us to take a look inside. Now, in this house, there are 6 people who live in this house, 2 adults, 4 kids. 2 of the kids are sponsored by Compassion. Pittman family, you sponsor Naomi. And if you thought this isn't real, let me just show you. Those are the Christmas presents that you sent this last Christmas. There's another kid, Elkin. We're not sure who sponsored him because they had written a letter, but the rains came, and that letter got lost in the flooding. But again, 6 people live in this house, and although 2 kids are sponsored, the Compassion sponsorship is providing food for the entire family through the church.
$38 a month. And this pastor says, Chris, you have no idea. I walk into home after home after home in this community, and when it's so hard to tell people about Christ, every door is open to me. Because every family in this community knows you're the ones that's already been loving our kids. You're the ones that's already been loving our kids. Because 300 North Coasters sponsored 300 kids in that community, and this pastor goes, now I have free reign to walk anywhere I want and talk to anybody about Christ, because you've already been loving their kids. The mom said she was glad that her daughters and her son got to eat that day. She usually doesn't get to eat that day, so she started volunteering, because she found out if she volunteered, she gets to eat in the kitchen afterwards. And in volunteering, she heard about Christ and accepted him. And then she wipes a tear from her eye, and she goes, my husband now goes to church with me on the weekends because he sees what you're doing with the kids. I got a letter this week from DCPI, Dynamic Church Planning International. If you remember, several years ago, I got up here and said, hey, we want to plant churches in Vietnam and Malaysia. And again, we had buckets in the back door. It was only one Sunday. For those of you that put stuff in the buckets, Here's the report that comes in about every 4 to 6 months. Dear North Coast, we want you to know what's happening because of your project and generosity in Vietnam, Malaysia, and Japan. To date, your investments have resulted in 2,005 church planters trained and equipped to go out now and plant their own churches, as well as 53 next-gen challenged to plant churches. DCPI's research projects that now 5,400 churches will be planted in these 3 countries within the next 5 years because of the men and women that you've trained and equipped. By the way, it closes with just a little side note. We want you to pray. One of our most productive master trainers, Raymond Koh in Malaysia, was publicly kidnapped by Muslim extremists. He hasn't been heard of since January. We are hoping and praying for him, but your work continues. We have not slowed down. That's a side note. By the way, one of our best trainers was kidnapped publicly in January. Hasn't been heard of since. It's not slowing down what you're doing. Not in Malaysia. Not in Vietnam. It was 2 weekends of spare change in a church this size that says because of 11 chapters, I'm going to start think differently about my finances. And from this day on, I don't have finances. I get to manage his. I can say it's all God's, that's easy. But now spending it and living life like it's all God's, well, that can be a little more difficult. We still take family vacations. 2 years ago, we debated about putting a pool in our backyard. I wanted a place to keep my kids in my walls, not outside the walls through their teenage years. We sat on that for about 2 months, and I just put it on my 4 pillars. God, one day you're going to ask, what did I do with your stuff? It also says, you've richly given me everything for my enjoyment, but God, I can't use it just for me. God, do I want to be a rich fool? A rich fool? Do I want to be a foolish rich or a wise rich? And so Amy and I just said, we're going to do this. But here's what we're going to do for the next 2 years. Whatever we've done to our backyard, we're going to keep track of how much that costs, and we're going to make sure that we put that much more back into the kingdom. That's just our family. I'm not here to say, here's the rules for you. I'm here to say, North Coast, do your homework on this one. You're going to show up one day, and God's going to say, I got a question for you. And you're going to say, hey, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I already know what it is. Here's what I did with your stuff. We were taught this because you taught it to us. Keep being generous in amazing ways. So many of you are. If some of you today are saying, where do we start? I want to change a life. Where do we start? Compassion International has tables set up on every campus. I've been now to 7 different countries and looked at their organization from the inside out. I believe it with my own family and our finances, and with this church, I'm proud to sponsor and represent them without a dime coming to me in many different organizations outside this church. It's a place that's changing the lives of kids through local church, through indigenous pastors. It's $38 a month. If you say, Chris, we're being so generous, just keep being generous. If you're looking for a place to start today, compassion is a tool. The rule is, it's God's finances, and you're starting to spin it His way. This is a tool if you're looking for how to follow the rule. I want to continue impacting North County, other campuses, other lives. I want to continue to show videos of what you're doing in Vietnam, Japan, Malaysia. This isn't even to mention the 50-some missionaries you have across the globe today doing service in so many different languages. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but to say it's Father's Day. I'm just trying to be like Dad because of what Dad gave me. What a story. Father, may you take us, may you use us. May you continue to allow us to be one of the richest in the world. May you continue to bless us simply and for the sole reason that we can take your resources and bless others. Thanks for who you are in this Father's Day and what you have done for us. May that radically change now how we see our lives as living sacrifices and what we do with your stuff. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, as you go, to the best of our ability and knowledge, and when it comes to finances, I cringe a little bit because I'm like, oh, I don't want to be some televangelist talking about give the church your money. But you cannot get around the fact that Jesus spoke more about finances than any other subject because he knows what was going to stand in the way of you and him truly having all of you. And he goes, I want all of you. He goes, I don't need your money. I want you. And for me to have you, I need to break your grip of what's yours. And I want to unleash you to be more like your dad. And you're going to stand there one day and go, wait, when did I clothe you? When did I give you something to eat? When were you a stranger? And I rescued you. And he goes, let me show you these kids. I asked Compassion International, how many kids are waiting to be sponsored in Ecuador? And they said 500. And I said, by June, can you give me another 1,000? They said, we don't want these kids just sitting around waiting. And I'm like, give us 1,500 kids. My wife and I can't sponsor those. But I know the heart of North Coast. If you're already being generous, walk by the tables without any guilt, any shame, and just smile that other people are getting into the game. But if you're looking for a tool, I challenge you, stop by the table. We're going to pick it up from there next week. But on your way out, I want you to turn and greet somebody that I hope and pray has never gotten over getting saved. We should never, ever be getting over getting saved. See you guys next week.